Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. But look at y'all part down inside my chest, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate everybody stopping by real quick. So as you guys may or may not know, I actually just found this out today. I looked at it like a while back, but I re-looked back at it earlier, just checking tournaments. They do have the Grand Chess Tour going on right now in St. Louis. It is the St. Louis Rapid and Blitz. So, fairly quick games, not, the classical, long type games. So they are having that going on right now. So we just got done with the first round. We had actually, interestingly enough, I'm not sure how this happened, but we had Wesley versus Quang Liêm. So let me fix this. It's kind of bothering me just a touch. Reduce that down a little bit. Okay, good. This is the first round. So this is the first game that these guys have played together. Well, at least today anyway. They played a few days ago. So, for anybody who is coming from the Philippines, I will say mabuhay to you. Kamusta na magandang umaga, magandang araw. Kamusta na masaya ko makita kang muli. Appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. Maraming salamat aking makaibigan for checking out my stuff. Na nunawod. Anybody who is coming from Vietnam, I will say Jao Moi Nui. And Camon Dan, appreciate you guys very much for stopping by and taking a look at my stuff. If you guys are ready to go, let's take a look and see what we have for this game. So we got D4, D5, C4. So we're going to have like a slight difference than what we normally see. We see E6, knight comes to C3, and then we do have A6. So we actually have the Queen's Gambit decline, the Janowski variation. So pawn takes D5, pawn takes D5. So we kind of have like a little exchange situation going on a little bit. Knight comes to F3, we see knight to F6. Bishop comes to G5, we see bishop to E6. It wouldn't be the best ever if you allow the bishop to take here, because you are going to want to take back with the queen, but that is going to leave your pawn stranded, undefended. So we see bishop comes to E6 first, making sure that we have everything covered. We got E3 trying to get this bishop out. Knight B to D7. See bishop to D3. Bishop comes to D6. We have castles by white. C6. We got H3, castles by black, and then queen to D2. And, pretty much both sides have done what they needed to do. Technically you can say that black needs to get their queen somewhere, but, they both done what they need to do. They both, developed their pieces, got castle, got their stuff, that got their kings into safety. And so we do have rook to E8, which is the novelty of the game for black. Pretty principled move. This is a half open file. So logically, we're going to want to try to put our rook on that file. We have rook A to E1. We see H6. Bishop comes back to F4. And then we do actually see queen to C7. And for those of you wondering, why would you not take here? It's one of those situations where it kind of helps white just a little bit. It actually gives white some activity. If we do see bishop takes F4, pawn takes F4, and it's really like due to the nature of this specific position, because this bishop, if you're able to push F5, the bishop is kind of trapped. It doesn't really have anywhere to go. So you're going to have to free a move. You're going to have to put like knight to B6 or knight back to F8 to make sure that when F5 is pushed, the bishop can actually go somewhere. It gives, just adds a little bit more protection to white, having an extra pawn in front of their king. It might give you some, kind of attacking possibilities over here. So, you don't really get as much. It's not like, you took on like A3 or something and like created this type of a scenario, So backing up, we do see queen coming to C7. We have A3. And now, in this position, it actually is fine to go ahead and take on F4. Because, it's just, you do have a little bit better of a situation. The queen is eyeing stuff a little bit better. So we have rook A to D8. We see queen over to C1. Knight comes to B6. We see rook to E2. Queen comes back to C8. We're looking at, some possible sacks here coming up. So we do have knight up to E5. We have bishop to F5. Bishop takes F5. Queen takes F5. We have queen over to D1. Knight comes to C4. And now we're just adding like a really immense amount of pressure on this knight. Before, we were going to have possibly bishop takes back. It wasn't going to be very good to take with the rook. But with this knight coming down here, you really kind of have to resolve this situation, because not only are you attacking this knight, you're also trying to add, well, I guess not, because the rook is there. So you're not really attacking that pawn, but Knight takes on c4, pawn takes on c4. You see bishop takes d6, rook takes d6, and then you actually do have queen to a4. Queen to a4 seems like a very active move, like you're trying to attack this. You're trying to attack this pawn, but is actually defendable. But actually, in this position, it was actually pretty nice to actually go e4. And this is a pretty peculiar situation for you to be in as black, because you know, your best option is to go back to d8 so you can counterattack this pawn. Because if you were to take with the knight, thinking that, you know, you have enough you know, things being hit, you actually have queen to b1, and this is actually kind of unfortunate because this this queen is undefended, so now this knight is pinned, and f3 is going to be coming, so that's not the best. So like I said, after queen to a4, we do see b5, and queen comes to b4, but it actually was fine to go ahead and take on a6, and then you would just be up an entire pawn. Queen would probably come back here to defend this rook, to make c5 live. So, you know, you just simply just back up here on a5. And, I mean, you actually did just kind of win a pawn, you know, like I said, for white. So, we actually see queen to b4. Apparently, maybe Wesley So was looking at that like, hey, maybe he thought there was like a little risk with taking it or something like that, and he just didn't go into it. But queen comes to b4. We see rook d to e6. We have a4 trying to break down that structure on the queen side. Knight comes to e4. We see knight takes e4, queen takes e4, and then we do have queen to c3. Queen comes up to d5. Pawn takes b5, pawn takes b5, and then we have a rook f to e1. We see c5, pawn takes on c5, and then we have a really nice kind of like a little in-between move before we take back with rook to g6, because as you guys can see, this is threatening checkmate. And as I always say, as long as you're not about to get mated yourself, why not threaten checkmate? Your opponent is going to have to respond to it some kind of way. So what Wesley So does is he actually blocks with e4, you know, just throws the queen over to c5, takes that pawn. Rook comes to d1. We see b4. I mean, yeah, I mean, these pawns do actually kind of look a little scary, to be honest with you. You know, you're in a really, really nice position here as black. You know, you do have the ability to create a passed pawn over here. And this minority over here is doing a good job of, you know, controlling this majority. So the queen comes to d4. We see rook to c6, and this is like extra accurate by Liêm. You know, he's actually playing like pretty much all the top moves. So queen takes c5, rook takes c5, and then we do have rook to d4. And we have actually reached a point in the game that if you do want to pause the video and see what is one of the best moves for black to play, or you know, what was actually played in the game, go ahead and do so. Okay, cool. So for those of you that are like thinking from the black side that this rook is undefended, you might would have come up with f5. f5 is just trying to create a way to take advantage of the position of white, which, like I said, this rook is undefended, and try to break down this structure. This is, you know, kind of a threatening pawn a little bit, you know, because it is, you know, the further advanced than any of the other pawns. So we actually see e5. And we see c3 immediately, and then we see pawn takes c3, pawn takes c3, rook over to c2. But we actually had a really nice move to throw in there, and on an in-between. After we see e5, like, don't worry about this pawn at all. Don't be so quick to push c3, but actually rook over to b8. And there's a very legitimate reason as to why we're going rook to b8 in this position. King would probably come to h2. Now we see c3. Pawn takes c3, pawn takes c3, rook to c2. So it's like very similar to what we saw before. But the major difference here is rook to b2. And it's just the timing of everything that we see in this position. You know, in the position that we saw a second ago, like if we saw a rook to c2, we don't have the ability to bring this rook down. So you're really pressing the issue if you just kind of wait one more move and then rook comes to b2. And it's a lot more picturesque when it's on the last rank. But, I mean, you know, white doesn't really have a lot of options here. I mean, most likely they're going to go ahead and just, you know, move their rook down. But that's going to allow the push of the pawn. Because, of course, if you take, they're going to take. And then, I mean, you don't really have a lot of good things you can do in this position to defend this. Because this rook is going to be coming behind. And, you know, you might go something like that. But, I mean, this is going to be, you know, you really, really don't want your rook on this square like that. So, like I said, we did see rook over to c2 in that position. Rook E took E5. We saw Rook down to D3, trying to get rid of this pawn because now, as you can see, white is down a pawn. King comes to F7. We see Rook D takes C3. Rook takes C3. Rook takes C3. We have King to F6. We see H4, G5, pawn takes G5. Pawn takes G5. We see Rook to C6. Rook comes to E6. Rook comes to C5. Rook to E6. Rook to C6 with check. Rook comes back to E6 to block. Rook goes to C5. Rook to E5. And then we see Rook to C6 with check. And we do have a draw by 3-fold repetition for this one here. You know, like I said, I think it would have been really interesting. You know, of course not for Wesley So, but, you know, if we would have actually seen Rook to B8 first. You know, it's not that like Quang Liêm was just being too hasty. But, I mean, the crazy thing about chess is sometimes, you know, sometimes you feel like you really need to do something, but a lot of the times you don't really need to do anything. You just need to be patient and, like, you know, try to like find the best move in the position. And so it's kind of crazy. I mean, a lot of people are kind of impatient and they really just want to attack and just like rip your opponent's head off. But, you know, a lot of the times it's those quiet moves or it's those like subtle maneuvers that really just win the day. So that is that first game. I'm going to try to do as many games as I can. I'm definitely going to be there. The next round is Jeffrey Zhang versus Wesley So. So I'm going to be working on that game here coming up in a second. But follow my people in the Philippines. Let me get these good mornings for you guys. So, maayong butog, mayad na agahan, naibag na bigat, masantos ya kaboson, marhi na aga, buenos dias, maayong aga, mapia na uma, kapi ang kapo no dios, mayapa abak, mayad na aga, mapia agay, mapia kapa pizza, my big abukla, marjana buntog, maria mainat, malpe na aga, kasanyang gansi alabi, salam, merci, assalamu alaikum to you. Appreciate you guys very much. And anybody coming from Vietnam, come on, ban for coming by and taking a look at my stuff. And I will see you guys next time.